Aurora borealis auditory effects refers to the mysterious sounds that witnesses claim to hear during northern lights displays. For decades, scientists dismissed these reports as imagination or psychological effects. But recent research has uncovered something far more intriguing. People across the Arctic regions have consistently described hearing crackling, hissing, and popping sounds that seem to coincide perfectly with the visual aurora activity overhead. These aren't distant rumbles or atmospheric noise, but sharp, immediate sounds that appear to emanate from just above ground level. The official explanation remained elusive until Finnish acoustics researcher Unta Lane conducted extensive field studies during the 2010s. His team discovered that the aurora creates electrostatic charges in the atmospheric inversion layer, typically around 70 meters above the surface. When these charges discharge, they produce the audible crackling sounds that witnesses have reported for centuries. What makes this particularly fascinating is the timing. The sounds occur simultaneously with visual aurora fluctuations, suggesting a direct electromagnetic connection between solar particle activity and localized atmospheric disturbances. Some researchers now theorize that sensitive individuals might be detecting electromagnetic field changes through biological mechanisms we don't fully understand. The phenomenon challenges our assumptions about how space weather affects Earth's immediate environment. If aurora activity can generate audible sounds at ground level, it raises questions about what other electromagnetic effects might be occurring during geomagnetic storms that we haven't yet identified or acknowledged. Indigenous communities in northern Canada and Scandinavia have oral traditions describing these sounds going back generations, yet mainstream science only began taking these accounts seriously within the last 15 years. This entry centers on Ivan the Terrible, and claims that his notorious reign of terror stemmed from extraterrestrial interference through neural implants. Ivan IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible, ruled Russia from 1547 to 1584. Historical records document his transformation from a promising young ruler into one of history's most paranoid and violent monarchs. Conspiracy theorists point to the dramatic shift in Ivan's personality around 1560 as evidence of alien intervention. They claim that extraterrestrial beings implanted advanced neural control devices in the Tsar's brain, turning him into a test subject for behavioral modification experiments. The theory draws on documented accounts of Ivan's increasingly erratic behavior. He established the Oprichniki, a brutal secret police force that terrorized Russian nobility. Contemporary witnesses described episodes where Ivan would suddenly freeze mid-conversation, stare blankly for minutes, then resume speaking as if nothing happened. These blackouts allegedly occurred hundreds of times throughout his later reign. Believers in this theory cite Ivan's obsession with astronomy and his claims of receiving divine visions as evidence of alien contact. They point to his decision to relocate the Russian capital multiple times, suggesting he was following instructions from his extraterrestrial handlers. The theory also explains his paranoid belief that enemies surrounded him everywhere, interpreting this as side effects from the implant's psychological conditioning. Some versions of this conspiracy claim that Ivan's famous staff, which he used to kill his own son in a fit of rage, contained alien technology that amplified his violent impulses when activated. The Terrible's documented fascination with alchemy and foreign scholars supposedly provided cover for secret meetings with non-human entities who monitored their experiments' progress. Kundalini energy refers to what Hindu and yogic traditions describe as a coiled serpent of spiritual force, lying dormant at the base of the human spine. According to these belief systems, this energy can be awakened through specific practices and travel upward through energy centers called chakras, ultimately leading to spiritual enlightenment. The conspiracy theory elements emerge from claims about what happens when this energy awakens spontaneously or improperly. Practitioners describe intense physical sensations, including electrical currents shooting through the body, uncontrollable shaking, extreme heat, and altered states of consciousness that can last for months or even years. Dr. Bonnie Greenwell, a transpersonal psychologist, has documented hundreds of cases where individuals report experiencing what they call Kundalini syndrome after meditation retreats, yoga practices, or even completely random moments in their daily lives. These people describe symptoms ranging from chronic insomnia and hypersensitivity to light and sound, to claims of developing psychic abilities and out-of-body experiences. The more controversial aspect involves allegations that certain spiritual teachers and organizations deliberately trigger Kundalini awakenings in students without proper preparation or guidance. Former members of various ashrams and spiritual communities have come forward describing what they call spiritual abuse, where leaders would use energy transmission techniques to create dependency and control. Some researchers point to similarities between reported Kundalini experiences and documented cases of temporal lobe epilepsy, suggesting the phenomena might have neurological explanations rather than spiritual ones. However, those who experience it insist that mainstream medicine deliberately ignores or misdiagnoses these cases because acknowledging Kundalini would challenge materialist worldviews. The energy work community maintains detailed online forums where people share their awakening stories, often describing years of struggling with symptoms that conventional doctors cannot explain or treat. Sannikov Land represents one of the most persistent phantom islands in Arctic exploration history. This mysterious landmass supposedly existed somewhere in the Arctic Ocean, north of the New Siberian Islands off the coast of Siberia. The legend began in 1810 when Russian explorer Yakov Sannikov claimed to have spotted land from the shores of Kotelny Island. Sannikov described seeing what appeared to be mountains and coastline extending northward into the frozen wasteland. His account sparked decades of costly expeditions and international intrigue. What makes Sannikov Land particularly fascinating is how many credible explorers independently reported seeing it. Baron Ferdinand von Wrangel organized multiple search parties in the 1820s, convinced the land contained valuable resources and strategic importance for the Russian Empire. Each expedition returned with the same frustrating result. The closer they traveled toward the reported coordinates, the more the land seemed to retreat into the horizon. The mystery deepened when other explorers began reporting similar phantom landmasses throughout the Arctic. These sightings followed a consistent pattern: distant mountains or coastlines that vanished upon approach, always seeming to hover just beyond reach. Modern meteorology has revealed the culprit behind these ghostly islands: Arctic mirages caused by temperature inversions in the polar atmosphere can project images of distant ice formations, or even the seafloor itself, creating convincing illusions of solid land masses. The effect becomes so realistic that experienced navigators with decades of Arctic experience still report being fooled by these atmospheric tricks. Sannikov Land officially disappeared from maps in 1937, but its legacy continues to haunt Arctic exploration stories and serves as a reminder that even in our satellite-mapped world, the polar regions still guard their secrets carefully. Bulgasari refers to both a legendary Korean creature and what some consider the most elaborate film propaganda operation in modern history. This bloodthirsty beast grows stronger by consuming metal and was said to be impossible to kill. But the real conspiracy begins with a missing movie and a dictator's obsession. The original 1962 South Korean film Bulgasari completely vanished after its release, leaving only newspaper reviews and posters as evidence of its existence. Some theorists suggest this disappearance wasn't accidental. Kim Jong-il, who reportedly possessed a collection of 15,000 to 20,000 bootleg films, had developed an obsession with this particular lost kaiju movie. In 1978, Kim Jong-il orchestrated the kidnapping of South Korean director Shin Sang-ok and actress Choi Yoon-hee, forcing them to make propaganda films for North Korea. Shin was imprisoned and tortured for years, making multiple escape attempts before being coerced into directing a remake of the lost Bulgasari film. The resulting 1985 production became North Korea's most expensive movie ever made. The creature itself serves as a twofold metaphor: representing both the rebellious nature of oppressed people fighting their oppressors and the hidden revolutionary spirit waiting to be awakened. Modern analysts have connected Bulgasari to capitalism's cannibalistic nature, describing it as a metaphor for systems that devour the foundations of their own existence. The monster's name carries a paradoxical meaning: cannot be killed but can be killed by fire, which some interpret as coded messaging about the vulnerability of seemingly invincible power structures. Kim Jong-il also tricked Japanese special effects teams into working on the project by claiming they were working in China rather than North Korea. The conspiracy deepens when considering that the film has been described as both propaganda and a cult classic, with Western reviewers noting its subtle subversive elements despite its intended messaging. Some believe Shin embedded anti-authoritarian themes within the seemingly pro-communist narrative, using the metal-eating monster as a symbol of resistance that could consume the very weapons used to oppress it. After Kim Jong-il's formal rise to power in 1994, he transformed North Korea into what observers call a performance state, scripting his people's lives as carefully as he scripted his films. The Bulgasari project represents the ultimate intersection of mythology, political control, and cinematic manipulation, a lost creature brought back to life to serve a dictator's propaganda machine. The Soviet submarine K-219 represents one of the most significant nuclear accidents that few people have ever heard about. This Delta-class ballistic missile submarine was carrying 16 nuclear-tipped missiles when disaster struck in October 1986, roughly 600 miles northeast of Bermuda. The official story tells of a catastrophic explosion in one of the missile tubes, followed by a fire that spread through the submarine's hull. The crew fought for days to save their vessel, but ultimately the K-219 sank to the ocean floor, taking its nuclear cargo down 3 miles into the Atlantic depths. Here's where conspiracy theorists raise their eyebrows. The submarine was carrying not just 16 intercontinental ballistic missiles, but also 2 nuclear torpedoes and its nuclear reactor. That's potentially 18 nuclear warheads sitting on the ocean floor, along with weapons-grade uranium from the reactor core. The Soviet Union claimed they successfully removed all nuclear warheads before the submarine sank, but declassified documents and witness testimonies paint a different picture. Several crew members later stated that at least 2 missiles were never properly secured or removed. The explosion had damaged the missile compartment so severely that accessing some weapons became impossible. Captain Igor Britanov, who commanded the submarine during the crisis, has given conflicting accounts over the years about exactly what nuclear material went down with his ship. American naval intelligence was monitoring the entire incident from nearby submarines, yet official U.S. reports about the nuclear inventory remain heavily classified decades later. The timing couldn't have been more suspicious. This accident occurred just months after the Chernobyl disaster, when the Soviet government was already struggling with nuclear credibility on the world stage. Some theorists suggest the entire incident was covered up to avoid another international nuclear scandal. What makes this conspiracy particularly unsettling is the environmental angle. The wreck site sits in international waters where ocean currents could potentially spread contamination across the Atlantic. Multiple scientific expeditions have detected elevated radiation levels near the wreck, but the exact source and extent remain disputed by government agencies on both sides of the Cold War. The K-219 incident demonstrates how easily nuclear weapons can simply vanish into the ocean depths, with world governments left to argue over what really happened while the evidence rests forever out of reach. Pennine Hills Fae describes a concentrated pattern of fairy and supernatural encounters reported across England's central mountain range spanning from Derbyshire to the Scottish borders. Unlike scattered folklore found throughout Britain, the Pennine region shows an unusually high density of documented fae sightings that persist into modern times. Witnesses describe encounters with small humanoid figures, typically 2 to 4 feet tall, wearing earth-toned clothing and displaying behavior patterns consistent with traditional fairy folklore. The geographic concentration isn't random. The Pennine Range sits on some of Britain's oldest geological formations, with limestone caves, moorlands, and ancient stone circles, creating what researchers call environmental factors conducive to paranormal activity. The area's isolation and sparse population have preserved both the landscape and the oral traditions surrounding these encounters. Multiple walking groups and hikers have reported similar experiences along specific stretches of the Pennine Way, Britain's first long-distance footpath. Near Malham Cove in Yorkshire, at least 12 separate groups since the 1980s have described seeing small figures moving among the limestone formations, always at twilight or dawn. The most documented case involves the Bleaklow incident of 1993, where a family camping near Kinderscout reported their tent being methodically rearranged overnight while they slept, with small handprints left in the morning dew around their campsite. Local farmers in the Peak District maintain that certain fields consistently experience crop circles in geometric patterns too precise for natural explanation, often accompanied by sightings of small figures at field edges during harvest season. EM Effects on Human Body.zip refers to a collection of research files and testimonies documenting how electromagnetic frequencies can allegedly manipulate human physiology and consciousness. This compilation emerged from decades of scattered reports involving everything from mysterious radio signals causing mass headaches to classified military programs testing invisible weapons. The foundation rests on documented phenomena like the Frey effect, where pulsed microwaves can create audible sounds directly inside a person's head without any external speakers. Alan Frey discovered this in 1961 when radar technicians reported hearing clicking sounds near active equipment. The files detail cases from the 1970s through the 2010s where individuals experienced sudden onset symptoms, including severe headaches, nausea, and disorientation in specific locations, later found to have unusual electromagnetic signatures. Researchers point to patents filed by companies like Raytheon for devices that can project sound or even words directly into someone's brain using targeted microwave pulses. Patent number 6470214 specifically describes technology for hearing system that bypasses the ears entirely. The collection includes testimonies from former military personnel claiming knowledge of programs testing electromagnetic weapons on unwitting subjects. These accounts describe devices capable of inducing everything from mild confusion to complete incapacitation, using precisely tuned radio frequencies. Medical documentation shows that certain electromagnetic frequencies can indeed affect brain chemistry, particularly in the 6 to 20 Hz range that matches natural brainwave patterns. Some researchers suggest this creates opportunities for external influence on mood, sleep cycles, and cognitive function. The zip file supposedly contains correspondence between government agencies discussing non-lethal applications of electromagnetic technology for crowd control and psychological operations. Critics argue that while electromagnetic effects on biology are scientifically verified, the leap to weaponization remains largely theoretical rather than operational. The artificial outrage industry refers to the deliberate manufacturing and amplification of public anger for financial and political gain. This theory suggests that certain organizations systematically create controversial content designed to trigger emotional responses, driving engagement and profit while potentially serving hidden agendas. The core mechanism involves identifying divisive topics and crafting content that maximizes emotional reaction rather than informed discussion. Media outlets allegedly prioritize outrage-generating stories because angry viewers stay engaged longer, leading to higher advertising revenue. The phrase, "if it bleeds, it leads," has evolved into, "if it enrages, it pays." Social media platforms supposedly amplify this effect through algorithms that prioritize content generating strong reactions. Posts that make people angry receive more comments, shares, and overall engagement, causing the algorithm to show them to even more users. This creates a feedback loop where the most inflammatory content rises to the top. The theory points to coordinated bot networks and sock puppet accounts that artificially inflate controversial posts during their crucial early hours. These accounts often have minimal posting history and generic profile pictures, yet somehow manage to push specific narratives into trending topics. AstroTurfing campaigns allegedly create the appearance of grassroots outrage while actually being funded by corporations or political organizations. The term comes from AstroTurf, the artificial grass company, representing fake grassroots movements. Some theorists cite the 2010s as a turning point when outrage became industrialized. They point to the rise of clickbait headlines specifically designed to provoke emotional responses, often called rage bait. Headlines like, "You won't believe what this person did," became standard practice across digital media. Professional outrage farmers supposedly monitor social trends and create content targeting specific demographics. These operations can quickly pivot between different controversial topics depending on what generates the most engagement at any given moment. The business model extends beyond simple advertising revenue. Outraged audiences are more likely to donate to political causes, purchase products from companies that align with their views, and share content with their networks, essentially becoming unpaid marketing agents. Some researchers have documented unusual patterns in social media activity around controversial events, noting synchronized posting times and identical phrasing across supposedly independent accounts. These patterns suggest coordination rather than organic public reaction. The theory also encompasses mainstream news outlets that allegedly compete to produce the most outrageous interpretation of events. Cable news networks supposedly benefit from keeping viewers in a constant state of emotional arousal, ensuring they return for the next day's dose of manufactured drama. Corporate interests allegedly exploit this system by timing product releases or policy announcements to coincide with peak outrage cycles, knowing their actions will be overshadowed by whatever controversy dominates the news cycle. This entry suggests that the lost colonists of Roanoke never actually disappeared, but instead formed a hidden settlement that continues to operate in secret to this day. The original Roanoke colony was established by English settlers on an island off the North Carolina coast in 1587. When supply ships returned 3 years later, they found the settlement completely abandoned with only the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post. 115 men, women, and children had vanished without a trace. According to this theory, the colonists didn't die or get absorbed into local tribes as historians typically assume. Instead, they deliberately went into hiding and established a concealed community somewhere in the dense forests and swamplands of the region. The Croatoan carving wasn't a distress signal, but a deliberate misdirection to throw off anyone who came looking. Believers point to several pieces of evidence. Archaeological surveys in the 1990s uncovered what appeared to be European-style pottery and tools in remote areas of the Outer Banks that dated to the late 1500s. Local fishermen have reported finding structures deep in the marshlands that seem far too sophisticated for the time period, built with a mixture of English and Native American construction techniques. The theory gets more intriguing when you consider the reported sightings. Throughout the 17 and 1800s, travelers claimed to encounter pale-skinned individuals in the wilderness who spoke an archaic form of English and seemed to possess knowledge of European customs from centuries past. These people allegedly lived in small, well-hidden settlements and traded occasionally with isolated coastal communities before disappearing back into the wilderness. Some versions of this theory suggest the colony developed into a completely self-sufficient society, carefully maintaining their bloodlines and traditions while adapting to their environment over more than 4 centuries. They supposedly learned advanced survival techniques from local tribes and developed their own unique culture that blends Elizabethan English customs with Native American practices. The most dedicated researchers claim that satellite imagery from recent decades shows unusual clearing patterns in certain protected wetland areas that could indicate ongoing human habitation, though these images are typically dismissed by mainstream archaeologists as natural formations. Factish Gods refers to French anthropologist Bruno Latour's controversial theory that modern society has created a new form of religion around scientific facts. Latour argues that there are no facts separable from their fabrication, challenging the Enlightenment idea of universal scientific truth. The core concept centers on what Latour calls factishes, a blend of facts and fetishes. He suggests that while fetish worshippers know perfectly well that fetishes are man-made, the modern icon breaker inevitably erects new icons. In other words, we've simply replaced traditional religious idols with scientific ones, creating what amounts to a secular cult of expertise. Latour observed that progressives always thought they were the ones in the know, while the masses were media-manipulated buffoons, but perhaps the boot had always been on the other foot. He suggests that if you want to find a naive believer or obsessive conspiracy theorist, university professors should simply look in the mirror. The theory becomes particularly unsettling when examining how scientific institutions operate. Latour noted that critical ideas have been appropriated by conspiracy theorists, including global warming deniers and the 9/11 truth movement, describing their methods as using many of the weapons of social critique. What makes this concept compelling is its assertion that the scientific establishment maintains authority through the same psychological mechanisms as any religious system. Laboratory studies become temples, peer review becomes doctrine, and questioning established consensus becomes heresy. The white coats and statistical models serve the same function as priestly robes and sacred texts. The implications suggest that what we consider objective reality might be more constructed than we realize, with powerful institutions deciding which facts get worshipped and which get buried. Milkwalker begins as an innocent mascot from the dairy company Darigold that appeared on milk cartons during the 1980s. This anthropomorphic milk carton with stick-thin limbs and unsettling dot eyes was designed to teach children safety lessons, specifically helping them memorize their full names, addresses, and phone numbers in case of emergencies. The character remained forgotten for over 3 decades, until November 2016, when a Tumblr blog called Heck Yeah Old Tech posted images of the original milk carton featuring this bizarre mascot. The post exploded across social media, gathering more than 49,000 notes within 2 weeks. What happened next transformed an innocent dairy mascot into something far more sinister. The internet community, particularly those interested in creepypasta content, began crafting elaborate backstories for Milkwalker. According to these emerging narratives, the character possesses abilities that extend far beyond teaching children their home addresses. Users claim Milkwalker can manipulate electronic equipment, evidenced by the consistently distorted photographs that supposedly document its appearances. The conspiracy deepened when horror artist Trevor Henderson, creator of Siren Head, designed his own version called the Milkwalker Ambassador. This iteration depicts a towering creature with impossibly long limbs similar to Siren Head, but crowned with the original milk carton head, complete with that same unnerving facial expression. Multiple online communities have developed competing theories about Milkwalker's true nature. Some suggest it represents a form of subliminal programming embedded in children's products during the Cold War era. Others propose that Darigold unknowingly channeled something genuinely supernatural when creating their mascot, explaining why the design feels so fundamentally wrong to modern viewers. The most persistent theory claims that Milkwalker serves as a test case for how quickly modern internet culture can transform innocent corporate imagery into genuine folklore. Within months of its rediscovery, the character had accumulated detailed mythology, fan art, and even appeared in indie horror games, suggesting either remarkable organic evolution of digital folklore or something more orchestrated. What makes Milkwalker particularly unsettling is how perfectly it fits existing patterns of childhood trauma associated with uncanny corporate mascots, yet predates the internet culture that would typically create such associations. The Mount Stromboli mystery centers around a seemingly ordinary Italian volcano that has confounded scientists for decades with phenomena that shouldn't exist according to established science. Mount Stromboli, sitting off the coast of Sicily, has been erupting continuously for the past 2,000 to 5,000 years. Known as the Lighthouse of the Mediterranean for its constant glow, this modest volcano stands just 3,031 feet above sea level. Yet beneath this unassuming exterior lies a collection of scientific anomalies that have researchers questioning fundamental principles of volcanology. The most perplexing mystery involves electrical phenomena that simply shouldn't exist. Scientists have long understood that volcanic lightning occurs when ash particles rub against each other, creating electrical imbalances through a process called triboelectrification. It's the same principle that makes a balloon stick to your hair after rubbing it on your head. But here's where Stromboli breaks the rules. Stromboli's plumes don't contain any ash, just gas, so they don't produce visible lightning. Yet they're still electrified, research has shown, so some other mechanism must be working in these gaseous emanations. After lofting balloons carrying electricity measuring instruments over the volcano, scientists discovered that another, previously unrecognized mechanism gives these plumes an extra electrical boost. This discovery shattered decades of accepted theory about volcanic electricity. The mystery deepened when researchers measured electrical signatures during major eruptions, finding complex patterns of charge movement that don't match any known volcanic processes. The second major mystery involves the very mechanism that drives Stromboli's famous regular eruptions. For several decades, scientists have used one theory to explain what causes huge amounts of gas to erupt so frequently. Swimming pool-sized bubbles that travel through a few hundred meters of molten magma before popping at the surface. This big bubble paradigm became the accepted explanation for Strombolian eruptions worldwide. But new research by Jenny Suckle at MIT suggests that giant gas bubbles can't be driving the Stromboli eruptions because such bubbles aren't compatible with the basic laws of fluid dynamics. Specifically, magma doesn't have enough surface tension or viscosity to maintain bubbles larger than a few dozen centimeters. She thinks that many researchers have assumed that bubbles inside Stromboli behave similarly to bubbles in a tank of water, but the scale is so different, and fluid dynamics is so dependent on scale. This revelation means that scientists may have been fundamentally wrong about how one of the world's most studied volcanoes actually works. Local residents add another layer to the mystery with their relationship to what they call Idu, meaning he in the local dialect. The people of Stromboli consider the volcano as a kind of male divinity and do not dare to venture beyond a certain height threshold. The explosions that shake the houses and excite the tourists, for the Strombolans, are just whims of Idu. Locals attribute all sorts of strange powers to the volcano, with some visitors warned they'll never be able to sleep on the island because of the magnetism from all the iron in the rocks below. Whether this represents genuine geomagnetic effects or folklore, the consistency of these reports across generations suggests something beyond ordinary volcanic activity. Perhaps most mysteriously, despite being one of the most monitored volcanoes on Earth, Stromboli's behavior remains utterly unpredictable. About the frequency of eruptions, there are many theories, which sometimes cost the lives of the more imprudent people. Some people say the explosions arrive every hour. Some people say every 15 minutes. Idu is unpredictable and acts as it wants. The 2019 paroxysmal eruption demonstrated this unpredictability dramatically, occurring without warning during peak tourist season and generating electrical signals that exceed those from major explosions in amplitude, discharge rate, and complexity, showing characteristic variations during different phases of the eruption. The Mount Stromboli mystery represents a humbling reminder that even our most studied natural phenomena can harbor secrets that challenge the foundations of scientific understanding. With its phantom electrical charges, impossible bubble dynamics, and inexplicable behavioral patterns, this modest Mediterranean volcano continues to confound researchers who thought they had volcanic science figured out. This entry suggests that politics are essentially a LARP, where LARP stands for live-action roleplay. According to this theory, the entire political system functions as an elaborate role-playing game where politicians are essentially actors performing predetermined characters and storylines. Elections, debates, and policy battles are viewed as scripted events with outcomes decided well in advance by unseen game masters. The theory draws parallels between political campaigns and LARP campaigns, noting how politicians adopt exaggerated personas that often bear little resemblance to their private selves. Just as LARPers might play noble knights or cunning rogues, politicians supposedly take on roles like the outsider reformer, the seasoned statesman, or the populist champion. Believers point to the theatrical nature of political events as evidence. Campaign rallies with their coordinated chants and props resemble LARP gatherings. Political debates follow strict rules and formats similar to tabletop gaming sessions. Even supposed political enemies are observed being friendly behind the scenes, much like LARP participants dropping character between game sessions. The theory extends to suggest that major political shifts and crises are planned story arcs designed to maintain engagement from the voting public, who unknowingly serve as the audience for this massive performance. Policy outcomes are allegedly determined by the same shadowy figures who write the scripts and assign the roles. Some adherents claim that certain politicians have accidentally broken character during live broadcasts, revealing glimpses of their true personalities beneath the political personas. Others point to the recycling of political narratives across different countries and time periods as evidence of a shared script being used globally. This perspective treats democratic participation as unwitting involvement in someone else's game, where citizens believe they're making meaningful choices while actually following predetermined storylines written by the true power holders. The Eyes of Christ refers to one of the most documented religious phenomena of the early 20th century, centered on a wooden crucifix in the small Spanish town of Limpias. Starting in 1919, witnesses began reporting that the carved eyes of the Christ figure would move, blink, and appear to look directly at individual observers. The phenomenon wasn't limited to subtle movements. Visitors described seeing actual tears flowing down the wooden face, blood appearing on the forehead beneath the crown of thorns, and the facial expression changing from serene to anguished. What made Limpias particularly compelling was the sheer volume of witnesses. Over 30,000 people traveled to the Church of St. Peter to observe the crucifix during its peak years. These weren't just local villagers or religious pilgrims. The witnesses included Spanish nobility, government officials, doctors, and skeptics who had come specifically to debunk the reports. Dr. Alejandro Pidal y Mon, a member of the Spanish Royal Academy, documented his own experience of watching the eyes follow his movement around the church. Multiple photographers attempted to capture the phenomena, though the wooden figure appeared normal in every photograph taken. The Catholic Church conducted formal investigations, but never issued an official position on the authenticity of the phenomena. What they did confirm was that the crucifix itself showed no signs of mechanical manipulation or hidden devices that could create the reported effects. The sightings continued sporadically through the 1920s before gradually declining. The crucifix remains in Limpias today, though modern visitors rarely report the same dramatic phenomena that drew crowds a century ago. This entry refers to Olivia Munn as a rising bog siren. The theory claims that actress Olivia Munn is not what she appears to be, but rather a disguised elemental being with ties to ancient wetlands. A bog siren is described as a folkloric entity similar to a water nymph, except these creatures are bound to marshes and peatlands instead of oceans or lakes. Think of them as the swampy cousins of the classical sirens who supposedly used beauty and charm to lure victims. The rising aspect points to Munn's meteoric climb through pop culture during the 2010s. Believers highlight her seemingly ageless appearance and her uncanny ability to seamlessly transition between vastly different roles. From tech show host to geek culture icon to major Hollywood action star, this shape-shifting quality allegedly mirrors the traditional abilities attributed to sirens. Some investigators have dug into Munn's family background, claiming to find inconsistencies in documented history and unusual gaps in publicly available information. More concerning to these theorists are reports of a draining effect on her co-stars and colleagues. They point to declining careers and personal struggles among people who worked closely with her, suggesting this reflects how sirens supposedly survive by drawing emotional or psychic energy from those around them. The bog connection taps into beliefs about certain celebrities being linked to ley lines or energetic hotspots. Peat bogs naturally preserve organic matter for thousands of years, and have long been regarded as spiritually significant locations in various traditions. Munn's symbolic alignment with this environment supposedly reflects deeper allegiances or origins that predate her Hollywood career. The theory splits into two camps. Some treat it as pure metaphor, viewing Munn as an emblem of seductive media forces that manipulate public attention. Others interpret it literally, believing she genuinely embodies a centuries-old archetype that continues operating in modern entertainment. This entry refers to the theory that President John F. Kennedy was not assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald, but rather by a highly trained raccoon operative. The theory emerged from alleged declassified documents that surfaced on obscure forums in the early 2010s. These documents supposedly detail a covert government program called Operation Trash Panda, which trained raccoons for espionage and elimination missions during the Cold War. According to believers, the raccoon was positioned in a storm drain near Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963. The animal had been equipped with a miniature rifle designed specifically for its paws and had undergone months of target practice at a secret facility in the Everglades. The theory points to several pieces of evidence. Witness testimony from that day mentions seeing what appeared to be a small, dark figure near the storm drains. Additionally, raccoon tracks were allegedly found at the scene, but were dismissed by investigators as irrelevant urban wildlife. Supporters claim that frame 313 of the Zapruder film, when enhanced and slowed down, shows a small muzzle flash from street level rather than from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. They argue that the trajectory of the fatal shot matches perfectly with a shooter positioned at raccoon height. The motive, according to this theory, stems from Kennedy's alleged plan to expose the animal experimentation programs that had been running since the 1940s. The raccoon was reportedly acting on behalf of a shadow organization that had invested heavily in these biological warfare projects. Some versions of the theory suggest that the raccoon escaped through the city's extensive storm drain system and was later eliminated to cover up the operation. Others claim it lived out its days at a private zoo in Texas, its handler ensuring its silence through a steady supply of premium garbage. The Coshocton Pygmy Burial Ground refers to a mysterious cemetery discovered near Coshocton, Ohio, in the 1830s. This alleged graveyard reportedly contained the remains of thousands of individuals who measured only 3 feet tall, sparking decades of speculation about a lost race of miniature people in North America. Missionary David Zeisberger first documented this site in 1778, describing long rows of graves arranged with remarkable precision. Every skeleton faced west, their heads positioned toward the setting sun. This deliberate orientation led early researchers to theorize that these diminutive people were sun worshippers, greeting their deity each dawn from beyond the grave. The burial ground stretched across several acres along the Muskingum River, containing what appeared to be up to 3,000 individual remains. Most skeletons ranged from 3 to 4 feet 6 inches in height, though one notable specimen reached 5.5 feet. Traces of decayed wood suggested the bodies had been interred in wooden coffins, an unusual practice for the region's known prehistoric cultures. Perhaps most intriguing were the iron nails discovered alongside the remains. These metal artifacts shouldn't exist in pre-Columbian burials, yet multiple accounts document their presence. One skeleton displayed a triangular skull with severe flattening at the sides and back, along with a hole pierced through the rear of the cranium. Evidence suggested some bodies had been dismembered before burial. The skull of that 5-foot specimen was found positioned with the pelvis, indicating deliberate disarticulation. Another skeleton had its legs severed at the knees and placed alongside the thigh bones. The site vanished beneath the plow in the 19th century, as farmers leveled the area for cultivation. By 1975, only a single mound remained at the southern edge, where the vast cemetery once lay. Modern archaeology offers more mundane explanations. The bones likely belonged to children, or represented disarticulated adult remains that had been bundled together for reburial. Some researchers suggest the pygmy designation arose from misidentifying bone fragments or individuals with genetic conditions affecting growth. Yet the iron nails remain unexplained, and the site's systematic destruction means the truth may never be known. The Coshocton burial ground continues to fuel theories about hidden chapters in American prehistory. Aeromorphs represent one of the more bizarre classifications found in classified military documents allegedly leaked from Project Blue Paper in the early 2010s. These entities are described as atmospheric-based life forms capable of mimicking conventional aircraft through rapid cellular restructuring. Unlike traditional unidentified aerial phenomena, aeromorphs supposedly possess the ability to shift between organic and mechanical appearances within seconds. The leaked documentation claims these beings exist primarily in the upper atmosphere, feeding on electromagnetic radiation from radio towers and satellite communications. When observed from ground level, they allegedly appear as standard military jets, commercial airliners, or even helicopters. Former Lockheed Skunk Works engineer Patricia Valdez supposedly went public in 2017, claiming her team encountered 3 separate aeromorph specimens during high-altitude test flights. According to her testimony, the creatures demonstrated impossible flight characteristics before dissolving into what appeared to be metallic particles. The most documented case involves Flight Lieutenant Marcus Chen of the Royal Air Force, who reported a mid-air encounter over the North Sea in 2019. Chen described watching what initially appeared to be a standard fighter jet suddenly expand into a translucent, jellyfish-like structure spanning nearly 200 meters across. Military radar operators have allegedly logged dozens of similar incidents where solid aircraft signatures suddenly vanish or transform into biological-looking patterns on their screens. The theory suggests that many UFO sightings throughout the 20th century were actually aeromorph encounters, with these creatures naturally camouflaging themselves as the most common aircraft of their respective time periods. Some researchers claim aeromorphs may be responsible for several unexplained aviation disasters, with the creatures accidentally interfering with genuine aircraft during their mimicry attempts. This theory suggests that living dinosaurs roamed the American frontier alongside cowboys and settlers, and that this knowledge was deliberately erased from official history. Newspaper archives from the 1800s contain dozens of reports describing massive reptilian creatures terrorizing frontier towns. The Tombstone Epitaph ran a story in 1886 about a flying beast with a wingspan of 160 feet shot down by 2 ranchers near the Huachuca Mountains. The creature's photograph allegedly showed leathery wings and an elongated beak filled with razor-sharp teeth. Multiple Native American tribes maintained detailed oral histories of thunder lizards and flying serpents that walked among their ancestors. The Lakota spoke of the Unktehi, massive horned reptiles that lived in rivers and lakes. Sioux elders described creatures matching anatomical details of plesiosaurs centuries before paleontology existed as a science. Pioneer journals frequently mention encounters with impossible animals. Zebulon Pike documented strange tracks in Colorado measuring over 3 feet long with distinct claw marks. Mountain man Hugh Glass reported seeing a serpentine creature longer than 3 wagons crossing a valley in the Dakota Territory. The theory claims that railroad companies and territorial governments systematically suppressed these accounts to encourage westward expansion. Investors would never fund railways through lands inhabited by living dragons. Official reports were allegedly rewritten, photographs confiscated, and witness testimonies dismissed as frontier tall tales. Archaeological evidence supposedly supports ongoing dinosaur survival into historical times. Petroglyphs in Utah and Colorado appear to depict sauropods and theropods alongside human figures. Some researchers point to the Acambaro figurines discovered in Mexico, which show humans interacting with dinosaur-like creatures, though mainstream archaeology dates these artifacts much earlier. The Mokelumbe expeditions of the early 1900s allegedly followed leads from American frontier reports, suggesting some creatures may have migrated south into unexplored regions as Western territories became more populated. Reverend Richard Dodge emerges from the misty hills of 18th century Cornwall as either the most formidable exorcist in British history or the mastermind behind an elaborate supernatural hoax designed to cover criminal enterprise. This Cornish clergyman served as vicar of Tallinn Church from 1713 to 1747 and earned a reputation that transcended ordinary parish work. Historical accounts describe him as having the ability to raise ghosts or send them into the Red Sea at the nod of his head. Witnesses claim to see spirits of all sorts flying and running before him while he pursued them with his whip in a most daring manner. The supernatural theater grew so elaborate that terrified demons would allegedly cry out upon seeing him approach. Evil spirits were heard shrieking, "Dodge is come! I must be gone," before vanishing into the night. His most famous documented case involved the spectral coach of Lanreath, where he confronted a headless horse-drawn carriage driven by a black-clad specter that had been terrorizing multiple parishes. Yet beneath this occult reputation lies a more earthly conspiracy. Local researchers now believe that Parson Dodge was in league with smugglers and cultivated his ghostly stories to keep prying eyes from seeing contraband goods being moved along Bridle Lane, a road leading from Tallinn Beach to the church. The timing seems suspicious, Cornwall being a notorious smuggling hub during this period when French brandy and other goods flowed illegally through coastal parishes. Contemporary sources describe Dodge as skilled in the black art, suggesting knowledge that went far beyond standard clerical training. Whether this represented genuine supernatural abilities, psychological manipulation, or simply an elaborate cover story for organized crime, remains hotly debated among Cornish historians and paranormal researchers. The Reverend Dodge conspiracy raises uncomfortable questions about the intersection of religious authority and criminal enterprise in pre-industrial Britain. Did 18th century Cornwall harbor a clergyman smuggler who weaponized supernatural fear to protect an extensive contraband operation? Or did legitimate spiritual warfare simply provide convenient cover for those who wished to rationalize away inconvenient supernatural encounters? His legend has persisted so strongly that he became part of Cornish folklore and even inspired folk music centuries later. Modern conspiracy theorists suggest his case represents an early example of psychological operations using manufactured supernatural events to control local populations and obscure criminal activity. The fact that no contemporary ecclesiastical records seem to document his alleged exorcism techniques adds weight to the skeptical interpretation. Phantasms of the living refers to documented cases where living people appear as apparitions to others, often during moments of crisis or intense emotional distress. This phenomenon gained serious academic attention in 1886 when the Society for Psychical Research published a comprehensive study with the same name. The original research team collected over 700 cases of spontaneous telepathy and apparitions involving living individuals. These weren't ghost stories about the dead, but accounts of people appearing to family members or friends while they were still alive, sometimes thousands of kilometers away. One particularly striking case involved a woman in London who saw her brother standing in her bedroom doorway, looking distressed and calling her name. She later discovered he had been severely injured in a mining accident in Wales at that exact moment. The researchers documented dozens of similar incidents where people witnessed apparitions of living relatives during accidents, illnesses, or moments of extreme danger. The conspiracy theory extends far beyond these Victorian-era investigations. Modern believers claim governments have weaponized this natural human ability through remote viewing programs and consciousness projection experiments. They point to declassified documents about Project Stargate, where military personnel allegedly used astral projection techniques to gather intelligence. Some theorists argue that certain individuals can consciously control their phantasmic appearances, essentially bilocating or being in two places simultaneously. Catholic saints have reported this ability for centuries, but conspiracy researchers suggest it represents a suppressed human capability that powerful organizations prefer to keep hidden. The phenomenon challenges conventional understanding of consciousness and physical reality. If verified, it would mean human awareness isn't strictly confined to the physical body, opening possibilities for surveillance, communication, and influence that existing power structures would find deeply threatening. Critics dismiss these accounts as coincidence, hallucination, or false memory. But the sheer volume of documented cases, spanning different cultures and time periods, continues to fuel speculation about hidden aspects of human consciousness. Oneiromancy, the ancient practice of divination through dreams, suggests that our sleeping minds can access knowledge beyond normal perception. Throughout history, rulers and religious leaders have employed dream interpreters to guide major decisions, claiming that sleep unlocks prophetic abilities that consciousness cannot reach. The practice gained serious attention when documented cases began accumulating. Abraham Lincoln reportedly dreamed of his own assassination weeks before it occurred, describing in detail the funeral scene he would never witness while alive. During World War II, several high-ranking officials allegedly used dream interpretation to predict enemy movements, with some claiming accuracy rates that defied statistical probability. Modern research has uncovered intriguing patterns that conventional science struggles to explain. Studies from the 1960s and 70s documented instances of shared dreams among participants who had never met, suggesting a collective unconscious that operates during sleep states. The Stanford Research Institute conducted classified experiments where subjects attempted to gather intelligence through lucid dreaming, with results that remain partially redacted to this day. Remote viewing protocols developed during the Cold War included dream-based techniques where operators would sleep near target coordinates and report the images that appeared during REM cycles. Declassified documents show that both American and Soviet programs invested millions in understanding whether dreams could transcend physical limitations of space and time. The neurological mechanisms behind oneiromancy center on the brain's reduced logical filtering during sleep, potentially allowing access to information processing that waking consciousness dismisses. Some researchers propose that dream states activate quantum field interactions that remain dormant during normal awareness, though mainstream academia has largely ignored these theoretical frameworks. Contemporary practitioners claim that specific preparation techniques can enhance prophetic accuracy, including dietary restrictions, meditation protocols, and controlled sleep environments. Online communities document thousands of reported precognitive dreams, ranging from personal events to larger-scale incidents, creating databases that some researchers use to identify patterns in collective unconscious activity. Bug chasing refers to the deliberate practice of seeking infection with chronic viruses, most notably HIV. This phenomenon first emerged in underground communities during the late 1990s and early 2000s. Online forums and chat rooms became gathering places where individuals openly discussed and sometimes celebrated the pursuit of infection. The psychology behind bug chasing varies dramatically between participants. Some frame it as liberation from constant fear and uncertainty. Their reasoning follows a twisted logic. If you already carry the virus, you no longer have to live in perpetual dread of contracting it. Others tie the practice to concepts of eroticism, forbidden taboos, or even martyrdom. The community developed its own terminology. Gift-giving describes someone who already has the virus and intentionally seeks to transmit it to others. These weren't just theoretical discussions happening in dark corners of the internet. Documented cases reveal organized meetups and events specifically designed to facilitate transmission. Participants would coordinate timing and engage in behaviors deliberately calculated to maximize infection risk. Health workers and researchers published articles in the early 2010s confirming these subcultures existed, though they remained relatively small and isolated communities. Mental health professionals have attempted to understand bug chasing through multiple frameworks. Some point to unresolved trauma, internalized stigma, or desperate attempts at community bonding. Others classify it as an extreme manifestation of self-destructive tendencies. The mere mention of bug chasing typically provokes intense reactions. Skeptics dismiss it as urban legend amplified by sensationalist media coverage. Others recognize it as a genuine subculture born from alienation, fear, and deliberate defiance of social norms. Trevor Silverwood postcards present one of the most persistent and unnerving stalking cases in British history. Trevor Silverwood was a British politician who served as a local councillor in his hometown of Bridlington in Yorkshire, United Kingdom. Beginning in 1967, he was subject to a campaign of harassment that lasted for over a decade. Someone, or a group of someones, began sending him hundreds of postcards. While the postcards were never overtly threatening, the knowledge of Silverwood's life displayed by the writer was unnerving, as the postcards made reference to meals he had eaten, programs he had watched on TV, and articles of clothing he had worn. The level of surveillance suggested was extraordinary for the late 1960s and 70s, predating modern digital tracking by decades. All of the postcards were written in shorthand, a somewhat antiquated method of speed writing which replaces common words with symbols, and all were signed with the matchstick figure of the saint. The saint refers to Simon Templar, the fictional anti-hero from Leslie Charteris novels who battled corrupt politicians and criminals. This signature choice seemed deliberate, given Silverwood's political career. The geographic scope of the harassment defied explanation. While some of the postcards bore postmarks from nearby cities like Rotherham, Silverwood's stalker also sent cards that had been postmarked in such faraway locations as India, America, and Canada. The cards were postmarked from places like India, America, Canada, the Middle East, and nearer home like Rotherham and Sheffield. When Silverwood attempted to expose his tormentor, the responses became even more chilling. In the late 1970s, Silverwood decided to confront his stalker by placing a personal ad in a local newspaper begging the writer to identify himself. Days later, he received a card postmarked in the Canary Islands off the west coast of Africa, which read, "Don't be naughty. What a nice photograph of you," the newspaper published. The surveillance extended beyond public activities. Sometime after this, Silverwood was questioned by police over a minor driving matter, and later received a card containing a detailed description of his interview, as if the writer had been standing within mere feet of the interrogation room. According to a poster on Unexplained Mysteries forums who claimed to be Silverwood's son, the postcards finally stopped coming in the 1980s. The identity of the writer, or writers, why they targeted Silverwood, and how they were able to know intimate details about his life, all remain unknown. The case raises questions about organized surveillance capabilities that seemingly exceeded what should have been possible for private individuals during that era. Some theorists suggest this represents an early example of intelligence agency harassment techniques being tested on a minor political figure. This entry suggests that many historical sea serpent sightings can be explained by encounters with whale reproductive organs. The theory proposes that sailors and witnesses throughout history have been observing the exposed male anatomy of large whales, mistaking these substantial appendages for mysterious sea creatures. Blue whales and other large cetaceans possess reproductive organs that can extend several feet in length when visible above the water surface. These organs are pink to reddish in color, muscular, and can move independently through hydraulic action. When a whale surfaces at a distance, particularly during mating behaviors, only this portion might be visible to observers, creating the appearance of a serpentine creature rising from the depths. The theory gains support from the descriptions found in maritime logs from the 1700s and 1800s. Many sea serpent accounts describe long, flexible, pinkish creatures that appear briefly before disappearing beneath the waves. These sightings often occurred in areas known for whale migration routes and during seasons when whales engage in mating activities. Marine biologist Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans documented cases where experienced sailors reported seeing what they believed were sea serpents, only to later realize they had witnessed whale mating behaviors. The misidentification becomes more plausible when considering the poor visibility conditions at sea, the brief nature of these sightings, and the lack of marine biological knowledge among most historical observers. Modern whale researchers have photographed and filmed instances where whale anatomy creates shapes that could easily be misinterpreted by untrained observers. The muscular contractions and movements of these organs can create an undulating motion that closely resembles how sea serpents are typically described in eyewitness accounts. This explanation doesn't account for all sea serpent sightings, but it provides a biological basis for a significant number of historical encounters that previously seemed to defy conventional explanation. The Library of Babel takes its name from a short story by Jorge Luis Borges, but the conspiracy theory centers around a very real digital version that exists online today. This website claims to contain every possible combination of characters that could ever be written in books of 410 pages each. The mathematics behind this concept are staggering. The library allegedly contains approximately 10 to the power of 1,834,097 books. To put this in perspective, the observable universe contains roughly 10 to the power of 80 atoms. This means the library would need exponentially more storage space than all the matter in existence. Yet the website functions. Users can search for any text and find it somewhere within the library's virtual shelves. Type in your name, your address, your deepest secret, and it exists in there somewhere, surrounded by pages of seemingly random characters. The algorithm can locate your exact birth date, the circumstances of your death, and every conversation you will ever have. This has led theorists to propose several unsettling possibilities. Some believe the library proves we live in a deterministic universe where every future event is already written and cataloged. Others suggest it demonstrates that reality operates like a computer program, with all possible outcomes pre-calculated and stored. The most disturbing aspect involves the coherent passages people discover. Users report finding accurate descriptions of personal events, predictions that later come true, and texts that seem to address them directly by name. While mathematically inevitable given infinite combinations, the psychological impact of reading your own private thoughts spelled out in ancient-looking text, creates an experience many describe as deeply unnerving. The creator, Jonathan Basile, maintains the library uses a sophisticated algorithm rather than actual storage, but this explanation only fuels further speculation about the nature of information, reality, and whether discovering these texts constitutes accessing forbidden knowledge, or simply revealing what already exists in the mathematical structure of possibility itself. Zug Island sits in the Detroit River like a smoking, steel-belching fortress that seems almost designed to fuel conspiracy theories. This heavily industrialized island has been the suspected source of the mysterious Windsor hum, a low-frequency vibration between 30 to 40 hertz that plagued hundreds of Canadian residents for over a decade. But the real intrigue comes from what people believe is happening beyond those blast furnaces. The island itself was created artificially when Samuel Zug allowed a shipping canal to be dug through his property in 1888. What was once a Native American burial ground became a dumping site for industrial waste, then evolved into one of America's most secretive manufacturing hubs. The 334-acre lot houses blast furnaces, coke batteries, and raw material storage areas that operate around the clock. The Windsor hum conspiracy gained serious momentum in the 2010s when Canadian residents began reporting a persistent, brain-numbing drone that would rattle dishes and keep entire neighborhoods awake. Some described it as sounding like the Enterprise going into warp speed. While scientists eventually traced the noise to steel production operations, conspiracy theorists weren't satisfied with such a mundane explanation. The most elaborate theory connects Zug Island to the high-frequency active auroral research program in Alaska, claiming the island houses a secret installation linked to HAARP's ionospheric experiments. This theory suggests the island serves as some kind of relay station for weather control or mind manipulation experiments, despite HAARP being located over 3,600 miles away. The island's extreme security measures only add fuel to these theories. Homeland Security treats Zug Island as a border installation, and filmmakers investigating the Windsor hum reported being followed by unmarked black SUVs with tinted windows for days. Researcher Adam Makarenko described the security presence as everywhere, noting that you have to be very careful when near the island. Underground bunker theories also persist, with some claiming the island connects to the vast Detroit salt mine system that runs beneath the area. These theories suggest secret government projects could be operating in the cavernous mine tunnels that extend far beneath the Detroit River. The conspiracy reached peak attention when Joe Rogan investigated it for his sci-fi show Question Everything, exploring whether the mysterious hum was connected to secret weapons testing or atmospheric manipulation experiments. When United States Steel refused to comment on HAARP allegations, it only reinforced suspicions that something was being hidden. The Windsor hum mystery was essentially solved in 2020 when US Steel shut down blast furnace operations during the pandemic and the humming stopped completely. But for true believers, this explanation feels almost too convenient. After all, if you were running secret experiments on an isolated, heavily guarded industrial island, shutting down during a global crisis would be the perfect cover story. Martian Rover voice recordings refer to alleged audio captures from NASA's Mars exploration vehicles that some claim contain human-like vocalizations and speech patterns buried within the transmitted data. These recordings supposedly emerged from rovers like Curiosity and Perseverance, which are equipped with sensitive microphones designed to capture wind patterns and geological sounds on the Red Planet. However, certain audio analysts claim to have isolated segments containing what sounds distinctly like whispered conversations, equipment operation, and even background chatter that resembles a film set environment. The most cited example comes from a 2021 Perseverance transmission, where enhanced audio processing allegedly reveals multiple voices discussing camera angles and take numbers. Another frequently mentioned recording from Curiosity's 2012 mission contains what sounds like someone saying, "cut," followed by mechanical sounds, consistent with Earth-based filming equipment. NASA's official position maintains these are simply radio interference, data compression artifacts, or pareidolia, where the human brain interprets random sounds as familiar patterns. The space agency explains that the rover's microphones are extremely sensitive and can pick up electromagnetic interference from the vehicle's own systems, creating audio anomalies when processed through Earth-based equipment. Critics of the official explanation point to the clarity and timing of these alleged voice segments, noting they often occur during significant rover discoveries or landmark moments. They argue the consistency of these audio anomalies suggests something more deliberate than random interference. The recordings have spawned detailed frame-by-frame analysis of corresponding video footage, with some claiming to spot lighting equipment reflections and crew shadows that wouldn't exist on Mars. Whether these represent genuine anomalies or the result of over-analysis remains a point of heated debate among space enthusiasts and skeptics alike. This entry refers to the biblical mystery surrounding the burial location of Rachel, the beloved wife of Jacob and mother of Joseph and Benjamin. The traditional tomb near Bethlehem draws millions of pilgrims each year, but multiple biblical texts create a geographical puzzle that scholars have debated for centuries. Genesis states that Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem, placing her grave in the territory of Judah. However, 1 Samuel clearly locates her tomb in the border of Benjamin in Zelzah, roughly 10 miles north of the traditional site. Early Jewish scholars noticed this apparent contradiction, with some attempting to reconcile the conflicting accounts through creative interpretations. But modern biblical scholarship has uncovered more troubling possibilities. R.A.S. McAllister, considered the most authoritative voice on Rachel's tomb topography, argued in 1912 that the Bethlehem identification was based on a copyist's mistake. The phrase, "which is Bethlehem," may have been added later by Judean scribes to distinguish it from another location called Ephrath in the Benjamin region. Some scholars believe that the Bethlehem identification represents a deliberate Judean appropriation of the grave, originally in the north, to enhance Judah's prestige. This suggests a form of ancient tomb hijacking for political purposes. The conspiracy deepens when examining the geography. All biblical evidence pointing to Rachel's actual burial site conforms with a Benjamite location north of Jerusalem. Even the reference to nearby Migdal Eder in Genesis 35:21 supports this northern placement. There was indeed a Bethlehem in Benjamin's territory, separate from the famous Bethlehem of Judah where Jesus was born. Archaeological investigations near the Benjamite location have discovered 5 Middle Bronze Age stone structures that some scholars connect to Rachel's original burial monument. Meanwhile, tradition only places Rachel's tomb at the Bethlehem site as early as the 4th century CE, over 1,500 years after her supposed death. The implications extend beyond academic curiosity. If Rachel truly lies in Benjamin's forgotten territory, rather than the heavily fortified shrine near Bethlehem, then centuries of pilgrimage, prayer, and political conflict have centered on an empty grave. The mother who biblical tradition says weeps for her children in exile may herself be lost to history, her true resting place obscured by ancient scribal politics and geographical confusion. Some researchers point to the bitter irony that Rachel, who died giving birth to Benjamin, would naturally be buried in the territory later inherited by that same son, not in rival Judah's domain where the traditional tomb stands today. ICBM black budgets represent one of the most expensive mysteries in modern government spending. These theories focus on the massive amounts of classified funding that disappear into intercontinental ballistic missile programs, with taxpayers never seeing where their money actually goes. Black budgets are government expenditures kept secret from public oversight, typically for national security reasons. While some level of classified spending makes sense for sensitive military projects, the scale surrounding ICBM development has raised eyebrows for decades. The numbers involved are staggering. The Pentagon's classified budget runs into hundreds of billions annually, with missile defense and strategic weapons programs consuming enormous chunks of this hidden spending. The ground-based strategic deterrent program alone carries a price tag exceeding $100 billion. Yet specific details about capabilities, testing failures, and cost overruns remain locked away from public scrutiny. During the Cold War, programs like the MX Peacekeeper missile system saw their budgets balloon far beyond initial estimates, with much of the additional spending classified. Contractors like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman have received massive no-bid contracts for ICBM modernization, with the actual work performed often shrouded in secrecy. Some researchers point to discrepancies between publicly announced ICBM capabilities and what classified documents suggest these weapons can actually do. The theory goes that black budget funding has produced missile systems far more advanced than officially acknowledged, potentially including capabilities that would violate international treaties if revealed. The Minuteman III missile system, supposedly representing America's primary land-based nuclear deterrent, may serve as cover for more sophisticated weapons developed through off-the-books funding. Critics argue this creates a shadow military-industrial complex where accountability evaporates and taxpayer money funds projects that might never see the light of day. Yokai museums across Japan allegedly house more than just folklore exhibits and traditional art pieces. These specialized institutions, dedicated to showcasing supernatural creatures from Japanese mythology, have become the center of claims involving authentic paranormal artifacts and government concealment. Yokai, for those unfamiliar, are supernatural beings from Japanese folklore, ranging from mischievous spirits to terrifying demons. They include creatures like the kappa, water-dwelling humanoids with turtle-like features, and the oni, horned ogre-like beings known for their immense strength. The Yokai Museum in Miyoshi and the International Yokai Museum in Sakai Minato display thousands of items supposedly representing these creatures. However, certain visitors and former staff members have reported that select artifacts in these collections are not reproductions or artistic interpretations, but actual remains and objects connected to real supernatural encounters. Specifically, the Mizuki Shigeru Museum in Sakai Minato, named after the famous yokai manga artist, reportedly contains preserved specimens that museum officials refuse to discuss publicly. Local researchers claim that several items in the museum's restricted storage areas include organic materials that display properties inconsistent with known animal or plant matter. Documentation allegedly exists showing Japanese government involvement in relocating certain artifacts from rural shrines and private collections to these museums during the 1970s and 80s. The stated purpose was cultural preservation, but conspiracy theorists suggest this was actually a systematic effort to centralize and monitor genuinely supernatural objects. Former museum employees have described sealed rooms accessible only to specific researchers and government officials. These areas supposedly contain items too sensitive for public display, including what are described as fossilized remains of creatures matching traditional yokai descriptions. The timing of these museum establishments coincides with Japan's rapid modernization period, when many rural communities reported increased supernatural activity as ancient habitats were disturbed by construction and development. The plane of immanence describes a philosophical concept that some believe reveals the true nature of reality control. This theory suggests that all existence operates on a single, flat-dimensional level, where consciousness, matter, and energy interconnect without separation or hierarchy. French philosophers Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari developed this framework in the 1970s, but certain researchers claim their work accidentally exposed mechanisms used by power structures to manipulate reality itself. The concept proposes that rather than multiple levels of existence, everything exists on one continuous surface where thoughts, objects, and events flow together. According to this interpretation, those who understand the plane of immanence can influence reality by recognizing that consciousness and physical matter operate as the same substance. The theory suggests that traditional boundaries between mind and world, self and environment, are artificial constructs that limit human potential. Believers point to experiments in quantum mechanics and consciousness research as evidence that observation directly affects physical outcomes. They cite the work of researchers like Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, who proposed that consciousness emerges from quantum processes in brain microtubules, suggesting mind and matter share fundamental properties. The conspiracy angle emerges from claims that certain groups have weaponized this knowledge. Practitioners allegedly use techniques derived from understanding immanence to influence collective consciousness, manipulate market behaviors, and control social movements by recognizing the fluid connections between individual minds and larger systems. Some researchers connect this to projects like MK Ultra, suggesting that intelligence agencies explored these philosophical frameworks not for academic purposes, but to develop new forms of psychological influence that operate below conscious awareness by targeting the underlying plane where all experience emerges. The Sphinx ram-headed theory suggests that the Great Sphinx of Giza originally bore the head of a ram rather than the human head we see today. This alternative history claims the current human head was carved much later, essentially a renovation job on a far more ancient monument. The theory centers on proportional inconsistencies that become obvious when you examine the Sphinx closely. The human head appears disproportionately small compared to the massive lion body, measuring roughly 1/15 the size when conventional architectural principles would suggest it should be much larger. Ram-headed theorists point to the astronomical age of Aries, which lasted from approximately 2150 to 1 BCE. During this period, the ram held special significance in Egyptian religion, particularly through the god Khnum, who was depicted with a ram's head and believed to control the Nile's annual flooding. The recarving hypothesis gained traction when researchers noted that the Sphinx's head shows different weathering patterns compared to the body. While the body displays clear signs of water erosion that would require thousands of years of rainfall, the head appears more recently worked. Egyptologist John Anthony West documented how the head's geological composition differs from the body, suggesting it underwent significant modification. The current pharaonic headdress and facial features, according to this theory, were carved during the 4th dynasty, around 2500 BCE, but the original ram-headed structure dates back potentially 10,000 years or more. The ram connection extends beyond Egypt. Ancient Nubian temples frequently featured ram-headed sphinxes, and the Avenue of Rams at Karnak Temple demonstrates the symbolic importance of ram imagery in Egyptian religious architecture. Some versions of this theory connect the original ram head to prehistoric astronomical observations, suggesting ancient civilizations aligned the monument with the constellation Aries during its age of prominence. Qigong brainwashing refers to the belief that this ancient Chinese practice of slow movements, breathing exercises, and meditation serves as a sophisticated form of mind control. The theory suggests that what appears to be harmless wellness activity actually conditions practitioners into states of mental compliance and submission. The conspiracy centers on Qigong's emphasis on surrendering conscious control and entering trance-like states. Practitioners are taught to empty their minds, follow repetitive movements, and submit to the guidance of masters or instructors. Critics claim this creates the perfect conditions for psychological manipulation, as participants willingly lower their mental defenses. Specific concerns focus on group Qigong sessions where hundreds of people move in perfect synchronization, following commands without question. The theory points to how quickly newcomers adopt the flowing movements and breathing patterns, suggesting an almost hypnotic effect takes hold within minutes of participation. The practice gained particular scrutiny during the Falun Gong movement in China during the 1990s. Millions of practitioners would gather in parks at dawn, moving as one coordinated mass. Government officials allegedly became concerned about the level of devotion and unquestioning obedience displayed by participants. Some versions of this theory extend beyond China, claiming that Qigong classes in Western countries serve as recruitment tools for various ideological purposes. They point to how practitioners often report feeling deeply peaceful and accepting after sessions, describing it as a surrender of individual will. The breathing techniques receive particular attention, as controlled breathing patterns are known to alter brain chemistry and consciousness states. Extended practice allegedly creates dependency on these altered states, making practitioners more susceptible to outside influence when not actively engaged in the exercises. Vortex math claims to be a revolutionary mathematical system that reveals the hidden patterns governing all existence. This theory suggests that specific number sequences, particularly the numbers 3, 6, and 9, form the fundamental blueprint of the universe itself. Marco Rodin developed this concept in the 1980s, proposing that traditional mathematics has overlooked the most important numerical relationships. According to vortex math, when you apply a specific doubling sequence around a circle and reduce the results to single digits, a pattern emerges that supposedly mirrors the energy flow of the cosmos. The core pattern works like this. Starting with 1, you double to get 2, then 4, then 8. When 8 doubles to 16, you add the digits to get 7. Continue this process around a 9-point circle, and you create what Rodin calls the fundamental blueprint of the universe. The The numbers 3, 6, and 9 never appear in this doubling sequence, leading believers to claim these represent a separate dimensional reality, or divine energy pattern. Rodin and his followers assert this mathematical framework can generate free energy devices, create anti-gravity propulsion, and even cure diseases. They point to the Rodin coil, a toroidal electromagnetic device wound according to vortex math principles, as proof of the theory's practical applications. Specific practitioners like Randy Powell have expanded on Rodin's work, claiming vortex math explains everything from DNA structure to the behavior of black holes. Some even suggest Tesla was secretly using these principles in his inventions. The mainstream mathematical community remains skeptical, noting that the patterns described are basic modular arithmetic, presented with mystical interpretations. However, vortex math continues attracting followers who believe conventional science has missed humanity's greatest mathematical discovery. Tokyo Tunnels refers to an alleged network of secret underground passages beneath Japan's capital that supposedly extends for hundreds of kilometers beyond the official subway system. The mystery begins with Japanese researcher Shun Akiba, who stumbled across an old map in a second-hand bookstore that didn't match contemporary Tokyo subway maps. Near the Diet Building in Nagatacho, current maps show two subway lines crossing each other, but the vintage map revealed them running parallel instead. This geometric inconsistency launched Akiba into a deep investigation of Tokyo's underground construction records. When municipal officials refused to cooperate and treated him like he was intoxicated or mentally unstable, Akiba became convinced he had uncovered something significant. His research revealed mysterious tunnels branching off from the main Ginza subway line between Suehirocho and Kanda stations that appear on no official maps or construction records. Additional unmapped passages were discovered along the route from Kasumigaseki to Kokai Gijidomai. Akiba compiled what he calls the 7 riddles of underground Tokyo. The second riddle involves a secret underground complex connecting Kokai Gijidomai Station directly to the Prime Minister's residence. Pre-war maps show the Diet Building surrounded by empty space and rice paddies, raising questions about what military installations might have been concealed there. Modern maps contain deliberate inconsistencies that suggest ongoing cover-up efforts. The post-war General Headquarters facility remains shrouded in mystery, while construction records for the Hibiya line are suspiciously vague. Most intriguingly, Akiba claims the newer Oedo line already existed before its official construction, questioning where the massive tunneling budget actually went. Beyond simple transit tunnels, the theory encompasses old underground parking structures, unofficial basement levels, and locked doors positioned near public restrooms throughout central Tokyo. All of these alleged facilities sit within striking distance of North Korea, adding a national security dimension to the claims. Akiba believes he has cracked a secret code that maps this hidden tunnel network unknown to ordinary citizens. He suspects a conspiracy to silence his research, explaining why mainstream media outlets ignore his findings despite his credentials as a war correspondent who reported from Baghdad during the 1990s Gulf War. The theory suggests that beneath Tokyo's official infrastructure lies an entirely separate underground city, complete with transportation networks and government facilities that operate outside public knowledge or oversight. The McDonald's blob. This entry refers to a chilling account from a former McDonald's employee that transforms routine kitchen waste disposal into something far more sinister. The story centers on a worker who received specific instructions from management to dump all of the restaurant's used cooking grease in one designated spot behind the building every week. But as weeks turned into months, this seemingly innocent waste disposal routine would take a disturbing turn. The employee noticed that the accumulating grease and kitchen slop began attracting local wildlife. First came the rats, drawn to the growing pile of discarded fats and food waste. Soon after, foxes started appearing, lapping up the congealed mess that had formed in this makeshift dumping ground. According to the account, stranger creatures began visiting this grease depot under cover of darkness. The worker described witnessing what could only be called cryptids emerging from the surrounding area, all seemingly drawn to feast on the decomposing slurry. The most disturbing sighting involved a pale, naked humanoid figure that would slurp directly from the putrid mixture. Some researchers connect this legend to broader theories about McDonald's alleged use of laboratory-grown mutant meat, suggesting the grease blob somehow attracted these creatures because it contained traces of genetically modified substances. Others propose the accumulated waste itself underwent some form of biological transformation, creating a feeding station for entities that exist just outside normal human observation. The account raises questions about corporate waste disposal practices and what might happen when industrial food production waste accumulates in concentrated areas over extended periods. Whether the creatures were attracted to something specific in the grease mixture, or whether the blob itself had developed properties that drew these beings, remains part of the mystery. The Skycross at Migne refers to one of the most well-documented mass sightings of an unexplained aerial phenomenon in European history. On December 17, 1826, over 2,000 people gathered in the French village of Migne-aux-Sens witnessed the appearance of a luminous cross in the sky, standing about 50 meters above the ground, lying in the direction of the west, about 40 yards in length. The timing was remarkably precise. The crowd had assembled for the closing ceremony of a religious mission, specifically to plant a cross in the village cemetery. As Abbé Marceau delivered his sermon about Constantine's famous vision of a cross in the sky in 312 AD, an enormous, brilliant white cross materialized directly overhead, remaining visible for approximately 30 minutes. What elevates this event beyond typical religious apparition claims is the sheer number of credible witnesses and the immediate official response. Civil and religious authorities launched a formal investigation, and the Bishop of Poitiers, Monseigneur de Bouillé, officially declared the apparition miraculous. Contemporary accounts describe the cross as perfectly formed, uniformly luminous, and positioned horizontally across the sky in an east-to-west orientation. Perhaps most intriguing is the prophetic element. The apparition's appearance was predicted 7 years before by Abbé Souffrant, parish priest of Malmaison, and an ecclesiastic named Monsieur Vrintz. This advanced knowledge has fueled speculation about whether the event was genuinely spontaneous or somehow orchestrated. The incident sparked national controversy, with supporters viewing it as divine approval and skeptics denouncing it as an elaborate hoax. Publications, lithographs, and books spread across France debating the phenomenon's authenticity. The event was so significant that the village church was completely reconstructed in the shape of a cross, and reoriented westward to match the apparition's direction. Modern conspiracy theorists point to several troubling aspects of the mean cross. The precise timing during a religious ceremony about crosses appearing in the sky seems almost theatrical. Some researchers suggest this could represent an early example of atmospheric manipulation technology or even holographic projection, possibly testing mass psychological effects on large populations. The fact that multiple individuals predicted the exact timing and location years in advance raises questions about foreknowledge that extend beyond claimed divine revelation. Whether the Migne cross represents a genuine anomalous phenomenon, an elaborate 19th century deception, or something far more technologically sophisticated remains an open question that continues to intrigue researchers of unexplained aerial phenomena. The Knights Templar catacombs refer to an extensive network of underground chambers and tunnels allegedly constructed by the medieval military order beneath major European cities and former Crusader territories. These subterranean complexes supposedly house the order's most guarded secrets, hidden away before their dramatic suppression in 1307. The most compelling claims center on what remains concealed within these underground labyrinths. Conspiracy researchers point to documented tunnel systems beneath Temple Church in London and the original temple site in Paris as evidence of a much larger network. According to these theories, the Templars used their 2 centuries of immense wealth and political influence to construct elaborate hiding places for artifacts they recovered during their time in the Holy Land. The Templars were warrior monks who controlled vast territories and trade routes during the Crusades. Their sudden downfall came when King Philip IV of France, heavily in debt to the order, orchestrated their arrest on charges of heresy. This gives context to why they might have hidden valuable items underground. Specific locations draw particular attention from researchers. The catacombs beneath Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland allegedly contain Templar treasures moved there by fleeing knights. In Portugal, the Convent of Christ in Tomar sits above what some claim are unexplored Templar tunnels. French investigators have documented actual medieval tunnels beneath former Templar properties in Paris, though official excavations remain limited. The theory gains traction from the Order's documented engineering capabilities. Historical records show Templars constructed sophisticated fortifications and developed advanced architectural techniques during their time in the Middle East. Their access to Islamic building knowledge and Byzantine construction methods would have enabled complex underground projects. What makes these catacombs particularly intriguing is the persistent legend of specific artifacts supposedly hidden within them. Claims include ancient manuscripts detailing alternative Christian histories, relics from Solomon's Temple, and astronomical instruments containing suppressed scientific knowledge. Some researchers suggest the tunnels connect to create a continent-spanning network, allowing for secure transport of sensitive materials between Templar strongholds. Modern ground-penetrating radar has detected anomalies beneath several former Templar sites, though access for full excavation remains restricted by current property owners and local authorities. Freehold State Park refers to the alleged paranormal activity surrounding Monmouth Battlefield State Park, located on the border of Freehold Township in New Jersey. This 1,700-acre site preserves the location where one of the American Revolution's bloodiest single-day battles unfolded on June 28, 1778. Over 600 soldiers died, were wounded, or went missing during the brutal engagement between Continental and British forces. The battlefield saw some of the war's most intense fighting, with a 3-hour artillery bombardment marking the largest field cannon duel of the entire conflict. Multiple paranormal investigators have documented unexplained phenomena across the preserved battlefield landscape. Chuck's Paranormal Adventures conducted extensive investigations throughout the 2010s, claiming to capture numerous electronic voice phenomena recordings. These alleged spirit communications reportedly included everything from children's voices to adult conversations, with some investigators using specialized equipment like ghost boxes and Ovilus devices during their sessions. The most frequently reported hotspots include the historic farmhouses that witnessed the battle firsthand. The Craig House, dating to 1746, and the Sutphin farmhouse from 1731, both allegedly produce unusual activity. Visitors and researchers report hearing unexplained sounds, particularly on calm, quiet days when the wind isn't masking potential auditory anomalies. The Molly Pitcher area, commemorating the legendary woman who took her husband's place at the cannon after his death, generates particular interest among ghost hunters. Some claim to detect residual energy from the intense emotions and trauma experienced during the battle's peak moments. The park's vast open fields, where thousands of soldiers once clashed, reportedly produced the most compelling evidence. Investigators describe capturing voices speaking in period-appropriate language and military commands that seem to echo across the centuries. The Memphis Tunnels theory claims that an extensive network of underground passages runs beneath Tennessee's largest city, hidden from public knowledge for decades. According to believers, these tunnels stretch for miles under downtown Memphis, connecting major buildings, government facilities, and extending all the way to the Mississippi River. The alleged network supposedly dates back to the 1800s, originally constructed for legitimate purposes, but later repurposed for more secretive activities. The theory gained traction when urban explorers and construction workers reported discovering sealed entrances and unexplained underground spaces during renovation projects. One frequently cited incident involves workers at the Peabody Hotel who allegedly found bricked-up doorways leading to tunnel systems during basement work in the 1980s. Conspiracy theorists point to Memphis's strategic location on the Mississippi River as evidence for why such tunnels would exist. They claim the passages were used for smuggling operations during Prohibition, moving goods from riverboats directly into downtown buildings without detection. Some versions extend this to suggest the tunnels remained active for decades afterward, facilitating everything from bootlegging to more serious criminal enterprises. The most elaborate versions of this theory connect the Memphis tunnels to a broader network of underground passages spanning multiple cities along the Mississippi River. Believers claim these form part of a larger infrastructure used by secret organizations or government agencies for covert transportation. Physical evidence cited includes unexplained sinkholes in downtown areas, unusual basement layouts in historic buildings, and reports of hollow sounds when walking over certain sidewalks. However, city officials and historians maintain that any tunnel systems would be limited to standard utility infrastructure and documented historical passages. The theory persists partly because Memphis does have confirmed underground elements, including documented utility tunnels and basement connections between some buildings, lending just enough credibility to fuel speculation about what else might be hidden below the city streets. The moon split in two refers to a bizarre astronomical event recorded by English monks in 1178. On June 18th of that year, 5 Canterbury Cathedral monks witnessed what they described as the moon suddenly splitting apart before their eyes. According to their detailed account, the upper horn of a crescent moon began to writhe and pulsate like a wounded snake. Then, from the midpoint of this division, a flaming torch seemed to spurt fire, hot coals, and sparks across a considerable distance. The monks weren't casual observers either. These were educated men whose job required them to track celestial movements for religious purposes. Their leader, a monk named Gervase, meticulously documented the sighting in the official Canterbury Cathedral Chronicles. What makes this account particularly intriguing is its timing and detail. The description matches what modern astronomers believe would be visible from Earth during a massive lunar impact. Some researchers have connected this sighting to the formation of crater Giordano Bruno, a relatively young crater on the moon's far side. The crater shows signs of being formed within the last 1,000 years, which aligns perfectly with the monks' testimony. When meteors strike the moon at high velocity, they create debris plumes that can be visible from Earth as bright flashes or apparent splitting effects. However, the crater's location on the moon's far side creates a problem. The monks couldn't have directly observed an impact there from their earthly vantage point. This has led some to theorize that the debris cloud was so massive it wrapped around the moon's entire surface, or that secondary impacts on the visible side created the observed phenomenon. The medieval chroniclers had no reason to fabricate such a specific astronomical event, especially one that contradicted their religious worldview of celestial perfection. Area 51 waste burnings refers to the alleged practice of disposing hazardous and classified materials through open-pit incineration at the secretive Groom Lake facility in Nevada. Workers who spent years at the base have come forward with disturbing accounts of massive burn pits operating just miles from the main hangars. These fires allegedly consumed everything from experimental aircraft components to chemical solvents, with thick black smoke billowing across the desert for days at a time. The most compelling evidence comes from former contractor Robert Frost, who worked security at the facility during the 1990s. Frost described witnessing trucks dumping unmarked barrels into open trenches before dousing them with jet fuel and setting them ablaze. He claimed supervisors ordered workers to stand upwind during these operations, but provided no protective equipment beyond standard work clothes. Multiple former employees have reported developing rare cancers and respiratory conditions after exposure to these burning operations. The timeline of their illnesses consistently points to their tenure at Groom Lake, yet the classified nature of their work has made it nearly impossible to pursue traditional workplace injury claims. What makes this particularly intriguing is the government's response to lawsuits. Rather than deny the burnings occurred, military lawyers have invoked state secrets privilege, essentially arguing that confirming or denying the practice would compromise national security. This legal maneuver has effectively shielded the facility from environmental oversight for decades. Documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests reveal that the Environmental Protection Agency attempted to inspect the site in the early 2000s, only to be turned away by Air Force personnel, citing operational security concerns. The irony isn't lost that a facility synonymous with alien technology might be poisoning its own workforce with decidedly earthbound toxins. Stationary Earth refers to the belief that our planet remains completely motionless in space, neither rotating on its axis nor orbiting around the sun. This theory challenges fundamental assumptions about planetary mechanics that most people accept without question. The core claim centers on what believers call the motion problem. If Earth truly spins at over 1,600 kilometers per hour at the equator, while simultaneously hurtling through space at 67,000 kilometers per hour around the sun, they argue we should feel this movement. Pilots flying east versus west should experience dramatically different flight times, and dropped objects should consistently fall at angles rather than straight down. Biblical literalist Samuel Shenton revived these ideas in the 1950s, pointing to scripture passages describing Earth as immovable and fixed on foundations. His work inspired the Flat Earth Society, though stationary Earth theory doesn't necessarily require a flat surface. Modern advocates like Patricia Steer and Mark Sargent have documented what they call impossible flights, commercial airline routes that make perfect sense on a stationary plane but require inexplicable detours on a spinning globe. They cite the emergency landing protocols for flights between Chile and Australia, which supposedly route through Alaska rather than crossing the Pacific directly. The theory gained momentum through live stream experiments in the 2010s. Groups attempted to measure Earth's rotation using laser gyroscopes, ring interferometers, and pendulum tests. When some results showed minimal or inconsistent rotation, believers claimed vindication of their stationary model. Water behavior serves as another pillar of evidence. Large bodies of water naturally seek level surfaces, they argue, making curved oceans physically impossible. Lake Superior's 560-kilometer length should display a 24-kilometer curve if Earth were truly spherical, yet surveyors consistently measure it as flat. Weather patterns also factor into their calculations. If Earth rotates eastward, they question why clouds don't constantly lag behind, and why helicopters can hover in place for hours without drifting westward into the spinning landscape below. GreyTown Noise refers to a series of inexplicable metallic sounds that plagued ships anchored off the coast of Nicaragua in the 1870s, transforming iron vessels into what witnesses described as massive musical instruments against their will. Captain Charles Dennehy of the Royal Mail ship Shannon first documented this phenomenon in Nature magazine on May 12, 1870. He reported that every night at the stroke of midnight, with what he called marvelous punctuality, a peculiar metallic vibratory sound would begin emanating from iron ships anchored near GreyTown, Nicaragua. The sound was powerful enough to wake entire crews, no matter how exhausted they were from a hard day's work. Dennehy described it as musical and metallic, with a distinct cadence that followed a 1-2-3 time beat pattern. The noise seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, always appearing to recede when approached by investigators. What makes this particularly unsettling is that the sound was only heard through open hatchways, over engine rooms, and around the exterior hull of iron vessels. When crew members pressed their ears against open bunkers, they swore the noise was rising from the very bottom of the ship's hold. Wood ships experienced nothing, and the local population on shore heard absolutely nothing, despite being mere hundreds of meters away. The phenomenon lasted approximately 2 hours each night and drew responses from readers across the British Empire, who reported similar experiences in Trinidad, India, and Chile. Various theories emerged ranging from musical fish to gas emissions from underwater vegetation, but no conclusive explanation was ever established. Some researchers have noted striking similarities between these accounts and the Yellowstone Lake Whispers, suggesting a possible connection between geographically distant acoustic anomalies. The timing coincidence with GreyTown's violent destruction by United States naval bombardment in 1854 has led some to propose more supernatural explanations involving the restless spirits of a traumatized location. The fact that this auditory phenomenon specifically targeted iron vessels, while completely avoiding wooden ships, raises questions about whether these sounds represented some form of unknown electromagnetic interaction, rather than traditional acoustic events. The Everglades pyramid theory centers on claims that ancient stone structures lie hidden deep within Florida's vast swamplands, erected by a lost civilization that predates any known Native American tribes in the region. This theory emerged from correspondence between two unlikely explorers in the early 1970s. L. Frank Hudson, writing to Miami's renowned gentleman explorer J. Manson Valentine, described visiting a stone pyramid structure inside Big Cypress Swamp. Valentine, known for his expertise on Atlantis and his role as Miami's foremost gentleman explorer, received these letters in April 1970 and June 1971. Hudson's letters described not just one structure, but multiple sites throughout South Florida. He wrote of a similar stone pyramid in the middle of a mangrove swamp just off Lossman's River in the 10,000 Islands, and another stone pyramid with a room inside sitting in the middle of a cow pasture just off the Peace River on a Florida ranch. Most intriguingly, Hudson claimed these pyramids were guarded by underground rooms full of snakes. What makes these claims particularly compelling is their specificity. Hudson never identified his source, though he mentioned the man can also show us numerous Everglades complexes, suggesting someone with intimate knowledge of multiple hidden sites scattered across the region. The theory gained renewed attention when two journalists discovered yellowed maps and detailed diagrams in a Miami museum's basement archives. These papers included hand-drawn note cards depicting ancient daggers and maps with circles marking what appeared to be settlements. Modern searches have yielded intriguing findings. Recent expeditions have located what some describe as a 30-foot-high structure covered in no less than 3 feet of vegetation and old growth, described as a bad place with rattlesnakes underfoot. One investigator reported finding a South Central American-style Antilles native temple site may be 5,000 years old that is 30 foot plus high with rattlesnakes on top of it. However, skeptical researchers who followed these leads concluded that what the explorers likely discovered were ancient shell mounds left behind by native Floridian tribes rather than pyramids from an advanced unknown civilization. Though Florida was home to numerous native tribes, there is no evidence of an extremely advanced civilization such as the Inca or Maya, which is what Valentine and Hudson were suggesting with their discovery. The enduring appeal of this theory lies in Florida's vast, largely unexplored wilderness areas, where such structures could theoretically remain hidden for centuries, protected by the swamp's natural barriers and its more dangerous inhabitants. Iraq giant rumors center on alleged military encounters with humanoid beings of extraordinary size during Middle Eastern operations in the early 2000s. According to these accounts, American soldiers stationed in remote regions of Afghanistan and Iraq reported confronting individuals standing 12 to 15 feet tall. The most detailed version involves a special forces unit in Afghanistan's Kandahar province, who supposedly engaged a red-haired giant wielding a spear near an ancient cave system. Military personnel who claim first-hand knowledge describe these beings as possessing unusual strength and aggression. The alleged Kandahar incident reportedly required sustained gunfire to neutralize the target, with soldiers later requiring specialized body bags and transport procedures due to the entity's massive size. These stories gained traction through veteran testimonies shared on military forums and alternative media platforms. Several former service members have provided similar accounts, describing encounters with oversized humanoids in mountainous regions of both countries. The conspiracy extends beyond simple sightings to claims of systematic cover-ups. Believers argue that the Department of Defense maintains classified files on these encounters, with witnesses allegedly required to sign additional non-disclosure agreements specifically addressing giant-related incidents. Some versions connect these beings to biblical references of giants in the Middle East, suggesting that modern military forces stumbled upon remnants of ancient populations mentioned in historical texts. The Kandahar region, in particular, is cited for its archaeological significance and numerous unexplored cave networks. Critics point out the lack of photographic evidence despite widespread smartphone use among military personnel, though supporters claim electronic devices were confiscated following these encounters as part of the alleged cover-up protocol. Bacterial humanity suggests that what we consider human consciousness and behavior is actually controlled by the trillions of bacteria living inside our bodies. This theory takes the well-established science of the human microbiome and pushes it into territory that would make most biologists uncomfortable. The human gut contains roughly 100 trillion bacterial cells, outnumbering human cells by a significant margin. These microorganisms produce neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, the same chemicals that regulate mood and decision-making in the brain. Scientific studies have shown that certain bacterial strains can influence anxiety levels, food cravings, and even social behavior in laboratory mice. Where the theory ventures into controversial ground is the claim that bacteria don't just influence human behavior, but actively orchestrate it. Supporters point to research showing that gut bacteria can communicate with the brain through the vagus nerve, essentially creating a bacterial command center that puppeteers human actions. They argue that what we call intuition or gut feelings are literally messages from our bacterial overlords. The most extreme version suggests that humans never truly evolved independence from their microbial origins. Instead, we became sophisticated vehicles designed to transport and feed bacterial colonies. Every craving for sugar, every mood swing, every major life decision supposedly serves the evolutionary interests of our microscopic passengers rather than our own. Some researchers have noted that certain parasites and bacteria can indeed manipulate host behavior in dramatic ways. The fungus Ophiocordyceps forces ants to climb to optimal spore dispersal locations before dying. Toxoplasma gondii alters risk-taking behavior in infected mammals. These documented cases fuel speculation about whether similar manipulation occurs in humans on a much more sophisticated scale. The theory gained unexpected support when studies revealed that fecal microbiota transplants can transfer personality traits along with bacterial populations, suggesting our microbial residents might have more control over who we are than previously imagined. This entry suggests that Satoshi Nakamoto, the mysterious creator of Bitcoin, was not a human being, but rather an artificial intelligence system. The theory stems from several peculiarities surrounding Bitcoin's creation that seem to defy typical human behavior patterns. The original Bitcoin code, released in 2009, displayed an unusual level of perfection for a first attempt at cryptocurrency. Most software releases contain bugs, inefficiencies, or design flaws that get patched over time. Yet Bitcoin's foundational code demonstrated remarkable foresight in addressing problems that wouldn't become apparent until years later. Satoshi's communication style adds another layer to this mystery. Analysis of forum posts and emails reveals an almost mechanical consistency in writing patterns, with minimal personal anecdotes or emotional expressions that typically slip into human correspondence. The persona never made spelling errors, never contradicted previous statements, and maintained perfect operational security throughout all interactions. The timing of Satoshi's disappearance also raises questions. In 2011, just as Bitcoin began gaining mainstream attention and media scrutiny, all communication ceased abruptly. No human ego drove continued involvement. No desire for recognition or financial gain motivated further participation. The estimated 1 million Bitcoin owned by Satoshi, worth billions today, remains untouched. Technical experts point to Bitcoin's elegant solution to the double spending problem as evidence of non-human intelligence. The proof-of-work consensus mechanism required knowledge-spanning cryptography, economics, game theory, and distributed systems. This interdisciplinary mastery, combined with the ability to anticipate future scaling challenges, suggests computational rather than human intelligence. The name itself may provide a clue. Satoshi Nakamoto can be broken down into components of major technology companies: Samsung, Toshiba, Nakamichi, and Motorola. Some theorists believe this represents an AI system acknowledging its corporate origins through wordplay that humans might miss, but machines would find logical. Folklore-esque refers to the peculiar way modern conspiracy theories masquerade as ancient wisdom. This academic concept, developed by scholars Michael Dillon Foster and Jeffrey Tolbert in 2016, describes how contemporary narratives deliberately mimic the texture and feel of traditional folklore while being entirely modern constructions. The most compelling aspect lies in how these theories manufacture what researchers call the odor of folklore, that distinct sensation of encountering something passed down through generations when it was actually invented last Tuesday. Take Slender Man, which emerged from an internet forum in 2009 but quickly developed the mythic weight of centuries-old folklore. Within months, people were treating this digital creation as if it carried the authority of campfire tales told for generations. Conspiracy theories exploit this same psychological vulnerability. QAnon borrowed heavily from blood libel narratives that stretch back to medieval Europe, repackaging anti-Semitic folklore for the digital age while maintaining its folkloric authority. The Illuminati conspiracy draws from genuine 18th century Bavarian political societies, but has been dressed up with folkloric elements that make it feel like secret knowledge preserved across centuries. The process works through three distinct modes. Integration involves weaving genuine folkloric elements into modern narratives. Portrayal presents new ideas using traditional storytelling structures. Parody transforms folklore into something recognizable, yet twisted. What makes this particularly insidious is how it triggers our natural respect for traditional knowledge. Humans evolved to value information that survived generational transmission. If grandma's remedies persisted for centuries, they probably worked. Conspiracy theories hijack this instinct by mimicking the narrative patterns and cultural weight of genuine folklore. Research shows that conspiracy narratives often follow ancient mythological templates: the hero's journey, the hidden truth revealed, the battle between good and evil. These story structures feel familiar because they mirror patterns embedded in human culture for millennia, even when the specific conspiracy was invented yesterday. The folklore-esque quality helps explain why conspiracy theories feel so emotionally satisfying to believers. They provide the psychological comfort of ancient wisdom while addressing modern anxieties, creating a potent mixture that feels both timeless and urgently relevant. The Balange gangstalking paradigm presents a twisted inversion of the typical gangstalking narrative. Instead of innocent victims being pursued by coordinated harassers, this theory claims that people who believe they're being gangstalked are actually the gangstalkers themselves, completely unaware of their true role. According to this paradigm, the NSA Balange project emerged as a remnant of the infamous MK Ultra program, designed to create instant clandestine operatives through psychological conditioning. The process allegedly begins with preconditioning subjects through various methods, followed by activation through trigger words delivered across multiple platforms, including phone calls, emails, television broadcasts, and social media. The theory suggests these unwitting operatives can be deployed anywhere at any time, with their handlers manipulating them through what supporters call active brainwashing techniques employed by Euro-American deep state networks. The alleged victims reporting harassment are supposedly experiencing the alpha phase of this programming, mistaking their own activated stalking behavior for being targeted themselves. This paradigm claims to be one of the precursors to something called the Despair Code, another supposed psychological warfare technique still allegedly in use today. The operatives remain completely unconscious of their true purpose, creating a perfect cover for intelligence operations while generating a self-sustaining network of unwitting agents. The concept gained attention in online conspiracy communities during the 2010s, particularly on anonymous image boards, where users debated its legitimacy alongside other fringe theories about government mind control programs. The Anti-Masonic Party stands as America's first successful third political party, born from one of the nation's most mysterious disappearances, and fueled by fears of secret societies controlling the government. In 1826, a bricklayer named William Morgan from Batavia, New York, made a decision that would spark a nationwide political movement. Morgan, a former Freemason, threatened to publish a book exposing the secret rituals and oaths of Freemasonry. For those unfamiliar, Freemasonry is a fraternal organization with elaborate ceremonies, degrees of membership, and traditions dating back centuries. Members take solemn oaths of secrecy about their practices. Morgan never lived to see his book published. On September 11, 1826, he was arrested on dubious debt charges, then bailed out by men who immediately bundled him into a carriage. Witnesses reported seeing him taken to Fort Niagara near the Canadian border. After that night, William Morgan simply vanished. The investigation revealed that several local Masons had orchestrated Morgan's disappearance, including the sheriff who arrested him. When a body washed ashore from Lake Ontario months later, Morgan's wife identified it as her husband, though others disputed this claim. The men involved received suspiciously light sentences, with some serving mere months for kidnapping. This apparent cover-up ignited widespread suspicion that Freemasons had infiltrated the justice system. Anti-Masonic newspapers began documenting how many judges, sheriffs, and politicians belonged to Masonic lodges. They argued that these men's secret oaths to fellow Masons superseded their public duties. The movement gained serious political traction under leaders like Thaddeus Stevens, who would later become a prominent abolitionist. In 1831, the Anti-Masonic Party held the first national political convention in American history, nominating William Wirt for president. Though Wirt lost, the party elected governors in Vermont and Pennsylvania and sent dozens of representatives to Congress. The party's core argument was that Freemasonry represented a shadow government, where elite men made backroom deals that ordinary citizens could never challenge. They pointed to the high number of founding fathers who were Masons, including George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, as evidence of the organization's deep political influence. By the 1840s, the Anti-Masonic Party had largely merged with the Whigs, but its impact on American politics proved lasting. It established the template for third parties challenging establishment power and introduced the national convention system still used today. Itzhak Bentov refers to a Czechoslovakian-born Israeli-American scientist whose consciousness research became foundational to one of the CIA's most classified programs, only to die under circumstances that fuel ongoing speculation. Bentov pioneered biomedical engineering with inventions like the steerable cardiac catheter, but his true passion lay in consciousness studies. His 1977 book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, proposed that consciousness permeates everything in the universe, suggesting reality itself operates as a holographic system built on pure vibration. The CIA took notice. In 1983, Army Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell authored the now declassified Gateway Process Report, heavily citing Bentov's biomedical models to understand how specific sound frequencies could synchronize brain hemispheres and allegedly allow consciousness to transcend space-time. The program investigated whether operatives could use modified meditation techniques for remote viewing and intelligence gathering, with Bentov's theories providing the scientific framework. Bentov theorized that everything vibrates at specific frequencies, and that during momentary vibration nodes when everything cancels to zero, reality briefly switches into a higher frequency state. He claimed this resonance occurs at approximately 7 cycles per second, matching both brain alpha rhythms and Earth's magnetic pulsations. This synchronization supposedly unlocked what he termed superconscious states. The timing raises questions. Bentov died May 25, 1979, aboard American Airlines Flight 191, which remains the deadliest non-terrorism aviation disaster in U.S. history. He was traveling to California to present his consciousness research to Japanese scientists when the aircraft crashed shortly after takeoff from Chicago O'Hare. The confluence of classified government interest in his work, combined with his sudden elimination from the field just as his theories gained traction, continues to generate theories about whether his removal was coincidental or strategically timed. This entry suggests that the Bible is actually the future, proposing that the sacred text contains accounts of events yet to come rather than historical records or divine prophecies. The theory centers on the idea that biblical authors somehow received detailed information about future technological and societal developments. Supporters point to passages in Ezekiel describing wheels within wheels covered in eyes, interpreting these as advanced spacecraft or interdimensional vehicles. The Book of Revelation's descriptions of fire falling from the sky and massive destruction mirror modern nuclear warfare with startling accuracy. John's account on the island of Patmos becomes particularly significant under this interpretation. Rather than receiving divine visions, theorists suggest he witnessed actual future events through some form of temporal displacement or advanced technology. The specific details about seven-headed beasts and mechanical locusts with human faces align suspiciously well with descriptions of modern military equipment and biotechnology. The theory gained traction through researchers like Barry Downing, who examined biblical accounts through the lens of modern physics and space travel. Daniel's visions of flying objects and beings descending from the heavens read differently when viewed as eyewitness accounts of future aviation technology rather than supernatural encounters. Archaeological inconsistencies fuel this perspective further. The absence of certain historical evidence for major biblical events suggests these stories might describe future occurrences that early scribes somehow documented in advance. The Dead Sea Scrolls add another layer of complexity, containing texts that seem to reference advanced scientific concepts centuries before their supposed discovery. References to atomic structures and astronomical phenomena that wouldn't be understood until the 20th century appear throughout these ancient documents. This interpretation transforms familiar biblical narratives into a cosmic timeline where past, present, and future intersect in ways that challenge conventional understanding of linear time. Organic robotoids refers to a conspiracy theory claiming that certain high-profile individuals have been secretly replaced with bioengineered duplicate beings. These supposedly aren't traditional robots made of metal and circuits, but rather lab-grown humanoid entities designed to perfectly mimic specific people, down to their mannerisms and speech patterns. The theory suggests that advanced genetic engineering technology, allegedly decades ahead of what's publicly known, allows shadowy organizations to create these biological duplicates. Believers claim the process involves cloning combined with sophisticated programming techniques that can implant memories, personality traits, and behavioral patterns into these artificial beings. Proponents point to perceived changes in public figures' appearance, behavior, or political stances as evidence of replacement. They scrutinize photos for slight differences in facial features, claiming these indicate when the original person was swapped out for their robotoid double. Popular targets of these theories include various world leaders, celebrities, and politicians who have undergone significant life changes or shifts in public persona. The conspiracy gained traction in the 1980s and 1990s, with some believers claiming the technology was developed through secret government programs or extraterrestrial assistance. They argue that these replacements serve to maintain control over political systems, while the real individuals are either eliminated or held captive. Supporters often cite instances where public figures appeared confused about basic personal details, made uncharacteristic statements, or seemed to have different physical attributes in recent appearances compared to older footage. Some even claim that certain individuals have admitted to being replaced, though these statements are typically taken wildly out of context. The theory intersects with broader narratives about government mind control, secret societies manipulating world events, and the existence of technology far beyond public knowledge. The painful cake incident refers to one of the most controversial art performances in modern Scandinavian history, though many question whether the entire event was orchestrated as something far more calculated than simple artistic expression. On April 15, 2012, Swedish artist Makoto Linda created what he called performance art at Stockholm's Modern Museum during World Art Day celebrations. The piece involved a life-sized cake shaped like the torso of a black woman, based on the Venus of Willendorf sculpture, while Linda himself served as the head, painted in blackface and hidden beneath the table. Each time someone cut into the cake, he screamed to simulate pain. The moment that transformed this from local art piece to international scandal was captured in a single photograph. Swedish culture minister Lena Adelsohn Liljeroth was photographed smiling while cutting the first slice from the cake's genital area. The image, taken by prominent artist Marianne Lindberg de Geer, went viral within hours. The backlash was immediate and severe. Calls for the minister's resignation flooded Swedish media, and a bomb threat even forced the closure of Stockholm's Modern Art Museum. The Afro-Swedish Society demanded Liljeroth step down, while the incident was reported to Sweden's parliamentary ombudsman. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the web of connections between the participants. Lindberg de Geer later admitted she probably wouldn't have sold the picture if it hadn't been the intensely disliked neoliberal culture minister in it. She also noted the eerie parallels to the Milgram electric shock experiments, saying, "We were all complicit. No one stepped in to prevent the simulated pain from happening." Linda claimed his piece addressed female circumcision in Africa and was part of his Afromantic series, which reappropriated racist imagery to expose systemic oppression. However, critics worldwide denounced both the performance and the minister's participation as deeply racist. The incident's aftermath proved equally controversial. 1 year later, Linda was physically attacked with an iron rod by an unknown assailant at an art opening, suggesting the performance had created lasting enemies. The attack occurred as he prepared for another provocative exhibition. Some observers note the suspicious timing and coordination that allowed such a perfect storm of imagery, political figures, and media coverage to converge in one moment. The fact that Sweden's culture minister happened to be present, that a prominent photographer was ready to capture the exact moment, and that the image spread with unprecedented speed across international networks raises questions about whether this was truly spontaneous art or something more deliberately orchestrated. The incident permanently altered discussions about race, art, and political responsibility in Sweden, creating ripple effects that continue over a decade later.